Donna Patton. I'm here with Pastor Josh, and we want to welcome to the table Grayce Schettler. Grayce just completed her first year of teaching at Peace with Christ Christian School. She's a graduate of Grand Canyon University. Before that, Lutheran High, right? And then also grew up in the Aurora Public Schools.
Sure did.
Yeah, so we want to welcome you to the table. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. We're so glad that you're here. And I love the name of this episode, The Church That Built Me.
Ooh.
What does that sound like to you?
Like that Miranda Lambert song.
I love that song.
The House That Built Me.
I just listened to it and I was crying the whole time. Yeah, why do you think that's a good topic for today's?
Because I grew up here. I grew up in this ministry, and being a student at, not at Peace with Christ as like a student at the school, but in the ministry, in the student ministry, just growing up here through high school, through middle school, and confirmation, and all that good stuff. Yeah, my major originally was engineering, mechanical engineering, and I wanted to build prosthetics for kids, still working with children, and I realized I did not have the motivation to do engineering. I could do it, I was capable, but I did not want to, so therefore didn't, and found my love for teaching, and I was really excited to become a teacher, and figuring out what grade and what age was hard. But I always knew I wanted to work with kids, so that's what brought me back to being an elementary school teacher and SPED teacher.
Okay, so first year of teaching. We want the nitty-gritty on that.
Yeah. First year was rough. Good, really good. Like, I'm going to come back, and I'm excited to come back. There were some tears, but, I've heard that that's very normal, which is good.
Right.
Car in the classroom, not normal.
Okay,
but
you got to share that just for a second. Okay. In case somebody's listening and they don't know.
So at Peace with Christ here, we're on a cross street of in Aurora, and a car ended up swerving or getting clipped by another car and hit into our building, which ended up being into my classroom.
And when we say into, the grill of the car was actually
Inside
your classroom.
Yep, there's a nice big hole now, right? It came in right where, you would have been sitting and working at your desk if you were there late. Yeah, kind of crazy.
It happened at night. No one was here.
Yeah.
So that's good.
That is good. And you had to navigate your class through that.
Yes, and that was difficult. That was not something I ever expected, but my students did so good, and they were so gracious with me being a first-year teacher in general, but also just being willing to be a part of changing and moving and all of the obstacles that we got.
Yeah, how is that with leadership? Because I think sometimes when we're a leader, right, we're processing how am I going to handle this? And then you put in front of the people and you realize that they're having just as hard of a time and I'm supposed to lead that. So kind of how was that leading them through that kind of unplanned, challenging thing? They're outside of their classroom for a number of days. How was that?
It was hard. I didn't realize there were some kids that were just piece of cake through the transition, and they didn't care where we were learning. They just wanted to learn, which was great. And then there were some kids that you could see they were impacted, and they were like, oh, this is different. And then there was a few that I was like, oh, man, I didn't expect you to have this hard of a time. Yeah. And in my mind, I'm thinking wow, this is going to be hard, but I can't think about me. I have to be putting them first. And so bringing in some different things that we had downstairs in my classroom into our temporary room was really helpful. And it helped the kids feel at home and be able to be in a place where they could learn. Yeah. A calm corner.
Built in your classroom.
Yeah. The classroom culture that I really hone in on is definitely home, like you said. It's where I want the kids to feel like they have a safe place. And more so in public school than in private school, you see where kids make school their safe place from home. But in private school, it's like they've always had school as a good place, and they might not have as many struggles at home as public school kiddos do, but they still do struggle, and they still do have post-pandemic tendencies and anxieties. And having a safe place to come at school and a place where they can navigate their emotions and not have a facade where they're pretending to be someone they're not. Like, this is a place where they get to become who they want to be. And especially third graders, they're little and young, and they're learning about what they want to do and how they want to act as bigger kids. And so just being able to give them a place where they can have their emotions but still then refocus and come back to learning is really important. So they can go and take breaks in the calm corner, and that's kind of like you have a 5-minute break, or, in the workplace, people go take a smoke break or a 5-minute break outside, and in school you can't do that. So you give them a place to kind of refocus and retract, and then they can come back and learn better.
Yeah, that's really wise. I love the word that you used, a safe place. And how do you came from a culture where peace was kind of a safe place for you, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And how do you feel? How did that happen for you? Can I ask that? Yeah. Hopefully that's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah. At Peace, it was like I grew up going here. I was baptized here by Pastor Hiller. But growing up in middle school, stuff got hard. Life got hard. And I needed a place to be able to come and just be me and have whatever emotions I had. And I was able to come and do that at confirmation class and youth group and weekend camps or whatever activities we did. But being able to, especially through high school too, middle school and high school were really hard years for me. And so being able to come to Peace and being able to be myself and kind of have a moment where it's like, oh no, it's okay. The baggage that I have at home, the baggage that I have at school, it doesn't matter here because this is my safe place. This is my home.
Yeah, and I think, right, that's the value of culture, right? Is that when we are in culture, when we see culture, when we experience culture, the hope is that, for a time, like, that culture is what we get to rest in, but then you get to, as a leader, begin to develop that and nurture that for other people. And then as you're blessed, right, we get to be a blessing to others, right? Which I think is so cool in that story, that you're building the exact thing that you were blessed with. Is that right? That's
really cool. Yeah, that's cool to think about.
Which is one of the reasons that you came back to Peace, right? You've shared that.
Yeah, I love Peace, and I have such a heart for this ministry, and it's really cool to come back and serve in a way that I felt like I was served too. Even though I didn't go to school here, I still met teachers here. I knew Donna here, and I was able to have a place here, and that I want to make sure that my students have a place too.
Now, it's kind of an interesting thing, and I haven't talked to Pastor Josh about this yet, but it's an interesting thing. We're seeing more and more people your age gravitate back to their home church, and a little older also. Why do you think that is?
Interesting. I didn't think that was happening, but that's really cool. I always thought, I watched my siblings kind of go to college and then never come back home. They started their life, they started their journey, and that was it. And which is awesome because they have this life to get like on their own, and it's exactly what they wanted or deserved or how God has their life planned. But I came back home. My brother has now also come back to Colorado, which is cool. So now that I'm thinking about it, I am seeing that is true, that people are coming back home.
Yeah, I think we have I want to say 5 or 6 people who grew up here who are now coming back to Peace. And they remember the days of growing up here, and they want that again for their kids. And it's exciting, but why do you think it is?
When you say it that way and you want your kids to come back and you say, like, not Aurora, but about peace, I think it's so true. Going to college and starting to try to find a church was so hard because you compare everything back to peace where you grew up, and I wanted it to be like here, and I couldn't ever find that. So I'm wondering if maybe families like that, they go off and they try to find something new, and they're like, no, they just come back and compare to what they had here, and they want their kids to have that safe place culture and that strong family, faith family kind of culture here that we have.
Yeah, I heard somebody say, I really would love to come back to peace, but I'm afraid that the peace that I left isn't the peace I would come back to.
Oh.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so the reality of it is history can never be reduplicated, right? So the peace of today can never, no matter how hard we tried, even if we wanted to, could never be the peace of 20 years ago, of 10 years ago, 5 years ago, right? Because we've changed, right? To say we're going to bring back all the people is impossible. To say, that we could have 50-year-old Hiller again here as our pastor is impossible, right? And so I think that's the reality of it, that it is going to be changing, but then also the fact that we need to be changing too.
Right.
Right? If we're not changing to meet the culture, we can't reach the culture. But the other part is I think the peace of yesterday was as much about the culture that we embodied as it was about the specific people and exactly who they are. And I think there is a lot of similarities, and your thoughts too, Grayce, on this, but I think there is a lot of similarities between what our culture was 15, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and what our culture is today. It might not be totally the same. The same people aren't going to be around. We're going to have different people up on the platform and different people on staff by and large, but I think the culture here has been something that's really we've built on as a church that was started clear back.
Yeah. I feel like that's so true. And also, people might think, oh, they want the same culture that they left, but at the same time, they might not, because they've grown. They're different people now in adulthood. I love the peace that I had as a kid, but I love the peace that I have now as an adult. And I think it's a good difference. I loved the peace then, but that was what I needed at that time. And now I have a peace that I needed at this time. And I think it caters to different age groups too. So it's never going to be the same because you're changing.
I grew up in the same house my whole life.
Okay, wow.
And I got to go back to it and take a look. And I've done it twice.
Okay.
But the last time I went back, they were like, do you want to come in and look around? And they've renovated our house. So I walked down the hallway. It's not even our house anymore, right? But that's the language I use, right? I walked down the hallway, and they were showing me the bathroom that my mom and I would use. And they go, well, come look at what we did to the master. And I turned to the right where more hallway was, and I didn't even catch as I was walking down, and there was a wall there. And the first thing out of my mouth is, what did you do to my brother's room? Where is it? And they had taken my brother's room and my mom and dad's room and made it a giant master, and taken my dad's little tiny bathroom and enlarged it. And it was gorgeous. And it fits them, right?
Wow.
And I realized, to go back to that song, the house I grew up in doesn't really exist anymore.
Yeah.
But this home is their home. Yeah. And it works for them. And I love how you said that so much, Grayce. That I loved this church as a kid, and I love it as an adult. That says a lot, about you and your heart, to see God at work and to trust Him in what He's doing.
Yeah, and the culture here, as much as it will change and ebb and flow, it's still God-centered, and Jesus is the one at work, and He's going to make sure that you feel the culture as you need to.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, that's what's most important, that we're following Jesus and resting in His grace and love and in His mercy. And but I think I think the family, one of the things, the community and the family-centeredness of peace, I was talking to one of the founders, and they said, what really connected us with peace is that it was a place for our family. And I love that we're having people that are coming in, and one of the things we're getting told over and over again, this is a place that I can see raising my family at. And I love that's such a such a big part of Peace's past and our present is that we get to raise our kids following Jesus here. And that's such a cool thing.
So we've changed some of the language at Peace to talk about faith family. Mm-hmm. And that's a culture that you grew up in, Grayce, where student ministry was referred to as, this is your family. Ohana means family. Family means nobody gets left behind. That was a big saying in your years here.
Oh, yeah.
So as you look at that, we've gotten a little bit of pushback of, hey, but this isn't really my family. Mm-hmm. What would you say to that? Like if somebody's going, yeah, this isn't my family. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that whole faith family talk.
Yeah. I think, we're not calling it your family. It's your faith family.
Yeah.
You're having a place where you can take your faith walk. My relationship with my siblings is not the same as my relationship with my fellow confirmads. Like we walked through Christ, like our Christ walk together here at Peace. And my siblings and we walked through life together, but it was different. And so your faith family stays with you through those times. And I also think this is another thing. Your family, they're stuck with you. They don't get a choice. It's blood, But your faith family chooses to stick by you, and it chooses to stay friends and having those relationships.
And why do you think that's like an important part that you have a family that chooses to stick by you? That was a really good language. Why do you think that's so significant in life?
I think that's what really makes it like a faith family, because you're here, you're faithful to one another, you're loyal to one another, and you're bonded through God. And I think that's where it's like you choose to walk through the hard times and the easy times of life.
Yeah, and the messiness.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty, because we're Jesus-centric leadership, right? The beauty of what Jesus did for his disciples, right? If you think about it, what did he do? He chose them. He said, come follow me. And he literally went to that person and chose them. And then I think that gives such confidence, right? When 4 years later, he goes up into heaven and they're left with the mission. They could always fall back on this, that this person chose me. He chose to love me, chose to call me. And I think that's such a powerful thing, in our faith walk as leaders, that we have a faith family that chooses to do life with us. And I think that gives us ability to go be the best dad I can be, or the best teacher, or the best friend or neighbor, because we have a family who, yes, first and foremost, Jesus chose us, but then a faith family that chooses to do life with us.
Yeah. How many years ago were you in youth group?
In youth group or confirmation?
Youth group, confirmation.
10
years ago. So Grayce and another student were just asked to be bridesmaids in one of the students' weddings, that they were all in the same life group together.
And in our same group, a guy it was a groomsman in his confirmad's wedding too.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And to go back and go, like you were saying, I choose you. I choose this time of my life where this was my faith family and still is in so many ways.
Yeah.
So, okay, Pastor, this has been fantastic and a little bit of walk down memory lane, right? The church that built you.
Yeah.
But how does this tie into leadership? And how does this really speak to our leaders and as they lead where God's placed them?
Well, I think if you're going to lead, you have to be built into as well. And I think that's the thing. We see that in Grayce. She's now leading students, leading culture. But I think it's really hard to lead from a place of what you don't know. And so I think that's a value, one of the values. And Peace with Christ, we're not perfect. I don't want to claim we're perfect. I don't want to think we're perfect or even behave like we're perfect. We're not.
Right.
But there's a lot here at Peace. There's a lot we can learn from doing life with the people around us. And so when we're doing life with people, when we're being poured into by our faith family, when we're learning about culture from our family, it gives us the ability to go out and ask ourselves, how do I apply that culture that I see as valuable to my family? How do I apply that at work? How do I apply that in my neighborhood? How do I apply who I am in Jesus Christ that I'm learning from my faith family into my leadership. And so I think it really goes back to this idea that, like, who are you leading and who are you following? Because if we're going to lead others, we need to be led by others who are following Jesus.
Yeah, and I'm going to push this just a little bit,
please.
because I think what you're saying is great, and we can all listen to this and go, that is so right. But that means we have to get out of our holy huddles, and we got to get out of our comfort zone of Sunday morning. When I see so many people, and I'm just going to, I'm going to kind of call this out. We get to church and we see the people that we see all week or we hang out with, and we're like chatting it up with them. And then we miss sometimes the people that are coming in and the opportunities we have to bring other people in to that faith family. I know we had to get really intentional with that in student ministry of, guys, I really need you to have welcoming hearts to the people that are coming in the door. But so how do we do that? How do we get our eyes off ourselves and really welcome people who need this faith family, or that maybe not need this faith family, but they need
a faith family.
Yeah. And God has given us this opportunity.
So I think I'll balance it a little bit. So I totally agree with where you're going on that, but I'll balance it. I think in a faith family, it always needs to be about who's pouring into us, but also who are we pouring into. Yeah. And so I would say
who's in front, who are you following, who are you leading?
Yeah, and so I would say if you come to church and you're only talking to people you don't know and you don't have that check-in with, with those other people, then that's not good. If you're coming and you're not a part of a home group, then that's not good. But I think like we need those people that can pour into us, that can teach us the culture, but then we also need to go out and gather a few others. And I think it's really a focus. I would say if you become the person that jumps around and tries to meet everybody new, that's probably not good. But I would say for each of us that are a part of Pieces, and especially if you're listening to this podcast, we consider you a leader, and you are a leader. Find one new person who you can kind of begin to pour into and begin to bring into your circle of friends or your circle of acquaintances, or that you can just pour into. So I think it's really thinking about the not the big picture of I want to grab everyone that comes in.
Right.
But how do each and every one of us begin to kind of approach one person, one family, and kind of help them be a part of what's going on.
And not just when I'm here.
Yeah.
Like maybe that's another layer of it, but also in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
So wherever God's placed you,
yeah,
who's that person that you get the opportunity to invite in?
Yeah.
And that's the whole joining Jesus, right?
Right. Yeah. That we ask people to join, because again, you are the extension of your faith family when you leave Peace. And so when you're friends with somebody, when you embody the culture and the heart of Jesus when you go out, you are a part of Peace with Christ when you're out there. And
that you did that, right? I mean, you had students that you were mentoring while you were in student ministry, and you had some friends that you were trying to bring into the church.
Yeah, that's true.
Was it hard?
Yes. Yeah, it's hard, especially when people don't know Jesus and they've seen Christ from this different perspective of being pushed and like forced into church, or that church is not what we think of church as, and not what we want other people to think of church. We want them to think of it as a faith family, and how gracious God is, and how gracious Christ is, and just that we are able to give that grace to others rather than like a judgy perspective, which I think so many people think of.
And just to talk about the reality of it, right? You've had one friend that you've been praying and talking to try to bring them in for how many years now?
A lot. Since sophomore year of high school. So 6 years. Yeah. Exactly, and you want people to see how much it means to you and how amazing Peace has impacted my life. I want Peace to impact other people's life in the same amazing way.
Yeah. That's really good.
Yeah. Wow. I'm going to go listen to the Miranda Lambert song again.
I don't even know what you're talking about. I'll have to listen to it now, too.
I listened to it in the car on the way home, and I was sobbing. So yeah, you can do that after you listen to this podcast today. Grayce, we just want to thank you so much for joining us, and we want to thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.